Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lost to the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Josh Myota, and tonight's returning guest is Peter Garcia. He's going to talk to us about his experience with Lord Shiva in India and his phenomena with the Phoenix Lights. With that being said, let's get into it, Peter.
All right. Well, the story starts out in martial arts. I was in karate class for like 9 years, and I met a guy from India. Who took the class, and he invited me to his wedding. And I'd never been to India, and it was free, so I went. It was all expense paid, and I remember getting off the plane, and walking out, and it was still kind of early in New Delhi where people weren't really out and the streets were kind of empty. And I was like, "Where's everybody at?" He's like, "Hey, in about 20 minutes, there's going to be like a million people out here." So we got them before they wake up. And he's like, "Well, we got to head to the pilgrimage up in the Himalayas, up by Jammu in Pakistan. So we got to catch this train. So we got to hurry." And that's what I was telling you. We saw the big rats and the size of cats. He's like, "Oh yeah, the rats eat people here." And we're looking down, and I'm like, man. He's like, "You fall in there, there's no help in there." And we saw the lepers, and we jumped on this train, and it was like a 3 day journey up to Jammu, northern India. It was up past uh, Punjab. So we get into this city um, in northern India. It's really close to the border of Pakistan, up in the Himalayas, and there's monkeys everywhere. They have like a human human. It's like a monkey god temple up there. There's like monkeys the size of people up there, and I know a few of them were my height, and it was like, man, that's a monkey. It looks like a person. They act like it too. We get up there, man, and I think the temple is what I'm. When we drive up in this bus, I think the temple is what I'm looking at. And he's like, "Oh no, that's the gate. The temple is up on that mountain." He goes, "It's 12 miles up. We're walking 12 miles up a mountain." He's like, "Yeah, it's the pilgrimage. That's the whole point of it. People have to do this at least once in their lifetime, and it's devoted to Shiva." Then I didn't know who Shiva was, but I kept seeing the classic statues of him, surrounded by fire, and him doing the pose. And he's like, "That's Shiva." And I'm like, "Okay, well, all right, cool." We start this pilgrimage right when we get there. I thought we were gonna rest a day. Oh no, these guys are hardcore. It was like maybe 3 o'clock when we got in, and they started at 6. So they're doing this pilgrimage at night, and we get up halfway, and I turn around, and I'm like, "Hold on, you guys, I gotta rest for a second. You guys are hard. These guys, I gotta tell you that we went with. They're Hindus, but they were like 8 feet tall, man. I mean, they were so tall. I couldn't even believe. I'm like, they loved me. I was like this little guy. And they'd put their hand on my head and shake it, and like their fingers would go around my head like a basketball. So we get up, and it looked like something out of Indiana Jones when I turned around. I'm like, I can't even believe I'm here in India, and I'm looking at this view. By this time, it's like halfway, so it was like 6 miles uphill to go. My breath was getting really, like, it was hard to breathe for me. They were ready to go, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go back to the hotel because I can't hardly breathe. And I kept seeing like these donkeys with Americans on it, with like air cans and canisters. They're having the same problem. I'm like, I'm not riding a donkey back down. I'm gonna leave you guys. This is your god. More power to you. I make it down, and I don't even know how I found the hotel because this is my first time in India. But I recognize little landmarks now. I'll save them in my head. I made it back. It was maybe like 3 in the morning by the time I opened the door, and I was like, I'm ready to go to sleep. So I hope they made it. So as soon as I hit the bed, it's like I wake up, like I'm awake, like I'm talking to you, I'm talking like it's like I'm awake, and I'm in front of this big temple. It looks like a temple to me, but I could hear like Indian music, and then I realized there's like 1,000 horns around this temple that just kind of like are long, like tall, and they all sound off at once. And I get images of old India, and I'm like, what's happening? And I it was like ancient India, like just images of cities and it was like the oldest parts of India. And then I end up in a cave, and there's like a cloud on the ground. And I remember when I appeared, it kind of like poofed up, and it was kind of a blue hue to the top of the cave. And I'm like, man, it's like I'm awake. I'm not asleep. It's not like a dream. It's like I'm in this cave. Then this blue being appears, and he's on one leg, and his arms are like graceful. He's a guy, but he's really beautiful. Like he's graceful. He's a guy I could tell, but he had like I don't know, like he was a pretty guy. He was like 14 foot tall, and he's sitting there, and he goes, "You woke me from my sleep," and I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know how he was talking to me, but he was like in my head, and
Like
he's like,
telepathically.
"Yeah," and he was like, "I'm Lord Shiva." He says, "You're the chosen one that was chosen to wake me," and I'm like, he goes, "I'm about to start my dance. I'm going to dance, and I'm going to change everything," and, and I'm going, "What? Like what?" And he's like, "I will contact you when I start." And then I wake up to like a knocking, and it's the guys. They're back. It's like 6 in the morning, and it's my friend, and he's a blonde, blue-eyed guy. He's like, "Oh my gosh, you won't even believe it. So we made it all the way to the temple, and there's snow." He's barefoot. He did the whole pilgrimage barefoot. He's like, "There was snow." I go, "You made it through that snow with your bare feet?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "I didn't know there was gonna be snow up there. There was soldiers we got," and he brought me back some coins from the shrine. He goes, "I left you some coins. I brought you some coins." And the other guys were all happy. They were doing their thing, eating food. And then we all go to sleep. And I wanted to tell them what I just seen, what just happened to me. But in my mind, something told me, don't do it. They're going to get angry. Because it wasn't them that went through the vision. It's the guy that believe in Shiva had the vision. So years later, you know, when I got back, it was kind of like I had a culture shock just being in America because everything was so clean. And my friend went on his merry way, and the one that got married, stayed in India. I guess he took over the whole land thing from his dad. He became the big guy. And it wasn't until 2015 that Shiva reappeared to me. And I remember it was a day right after my birthday, like maybe when the day changed. So it was like 12, and he appeared to me in my dream, and we were in that cave again. And he was like, "I'm starting my dance," and then he turns into a volcano, and it's sparking lightning, blue lightning, and it's going crazy. And he shrinks. He goes, "I'm starting my dance, and I'm going to wake up everything." And I was like, "Oh crap! Like it's already started." So I had the vision. He's showing me, and then like this volcano is following, and he's like, "You can't run from me. I'm gonna be following you." And I'm like, "Why?" And I'm running, and this volcano is following me. Then I wake up, and it's 6 in the morning, My first thing in the morning to do is turn on the news. So right when I turned on the news, it was the Chilean volcano that just went off in Chile. And it was exactly what I saw in my dreams, the blue lightning, the clouds. And I'm going, oh man, it started in Chile. I didn't know at the time that there was people that were taking pictures of this being walking out of this volcano. So maybe like a couple months later, when the pictures started coming online, and I was like, well, there's Lord Shiva. He even has a trident in his hand. I go, I remember the trident. I remember he had a, a bow and arrow, so he had a bow, and he had this trident. But the bow was like on his side, and he was kind of like. When I saw the picture, I go, "That's Lord Shiva. That's what he even blue." Like, whoa! Like it's already starting. So I'm freaked out. It's like still kind of like my birthday. We're going to celebrate, and me and my daughter walked to the store. It was kind of like it's really windy that day, and we're kind of walking against the wind, and she's like, "Yeah, there's a voice on the wind." Well, yeah, what's it saying? She says, "There's a great evil coming to California." I was like, "What?" There's a great evil coming to California that has to do with the water. I was like, "Is there safe places?" She goes, "Spokane, Washington, something Idaho, something Montana." It was all the states up by the Canadian border. There's like little towns that she was naming. She goes, Albany, New York, and something New Jersey. And she goes, "What's New Jersey, Dad?" I go, "It's a state." She goes, "You don't know what New Jersey is?" She's like, "No." She was young. She was like maybe 5 or 6. And I was like, "Oh man." I go, "Is there a safe place?" Oh, no, no. "How much time do we have?" And she's like, "We don't have any time." So like maybe 2 weeks later, I sold my Nova to move to Spokane since I already kind of knew it from when I first went there in 2013. So I figured I'll go to Spokane. It's one of the safe cities. So I didn't know what the great evil with the water really was. I thought maybe there was going to be an abundance of it, but I find now that it's the lack of it. Like the water's running out in California and Arizona and Colorado and New Mexico and all that. So that's the great evil I see now. I don't know if you've seen the news. They're like underwater. Like the rains are like monsoon like
Hmm.
in California right now. That's why I left. I mean, I didn't want to know what the evil was going to be, but I know it was from the lack of water. Now this was in '94.
With you coming back to America, have you ever told any of them guys or them
No,
the groomsmen that
nobody.
you're with? No.
No, I had like a family. I had a girlfriend and she had kids. I had a house and like a life, and I never told anybody. Yeah, I thought they figured I was crazy. You know, I mean, it was before any of this stuff was like mainstream. It was way before the internet, and yeah, they would have just called me crazy. Um, I know that was like not the first paranormal experience I had. I think the possession when I was 9 was the first thing, and there was maybe something before that. But after meeting Lord Shiva, it really kind of escalated. Um, I never really shared this story. I tried to, but then people would be like, well, they didn't want to hear it. It was just like something, "Oh, okay, great. You went through to India. That's awesome." Like, no one understood. It was maybe a few months after the Chilean thing with Shiva that he came to me again and he said, "The Gurus are going to fly, and it's my power that does it. It's my power." If they fly, it's because I allowed it to. And then you start seeing the humanoid beings flying over India. I already knew what I go. They must be Hindu, and Shiva came to them because he told me that's what was going to happen. That people were going to start flying. It was his power. And there was a few videos I remember that were on YouTube for a while of people flying.
I remember them.
And there was one that it was an actual guru that went through the roof, but you don't see that one no more. I know there was a few that they were over at an old city. I go, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like I go, yeah, that's what he said was going to happen. I'm pretty sure they're Hindu because that's who believes in Shiva. Um, and I remember going, well, I guess he wasn't lying because after 2015, you had these old volcanoes all over the world, that had been dormant for thousands of years, suddenly erupting. I mean, it's still happening. I mean, I still have dreams of Mount Shasta erupting. Um, Once I went to Washington, I had that dream, and it was the same kind of where it was blue lightning. That's how I know. When I see blue lightning in a volcano, I'm like, oh yeah, he woke it up. And I remember mentioning it to a friend of mine on Facebook, and she was like, I go, I don't know what it means. And she goes, they're trying to wake up the seven destroyers, and that's what CERN is all about. I didn't know at the time that Lord Shiva was the god of CERN, and the guard particle he's making it fly. And it's to open the next dimension over to the other six destroyers. One of them eats dirt. So you have all these cave-ins and the sinkholes happening. The other one was something else. And I can't remember offhand what the other one was doing. I think it was something to do with water, but I can't remember what it was. I live really close to Yellowstone, so it kind of makes me nervous because I did have a dream where I saw a volcano erupt, and the dream I had is this room, and the window I looked through was this window, and there was a volcano erupting, and I was like, oh dang, that must be Yellowstone. Like, wow. I go, he's here. So I mean,
That's terrifying.
yeah. So I mean, there's still stuff happening. So that was in India. That was in '94. So 3 years later, I was still in that house. I told you I had, a girlfriend, kids, and I got this overwhelming, controlling feeling that I needed to be in Phoenix. And I'd been there a few times visiting my brother and stuff, but it wasn't like, oh, I have to be in Phoenix. But this was like overwhelming. This was like, I don't know, I couldn't get it out of my head, and it was like a pull to go. Now, back then, I just made enough to pay rent and, have a family, and I might have had money, but not a whole lot, not where I could just go traveling. And I remember this check showed up in the mail out of nowhere, and it was just enough for this bus ticket. And so I bought it, and I just left. I couldn't handle the feeling anymore. It was just too overwhelming. My best friend kind of dropped me off. He's like, "Are you sure you're gonna just leave?" I go, "I can't help it." I told him, "I can't help this feeling that I have to be in Phoenix." So I jumped a Greyhound, and I've done that before a few times. We got into Goodyear, which is like maybe an hour outside of Phoenix. It's like an old Goodyear plant, but the town itself is called Goodyear. And the whole bus was kind of looking at these lights over Phoenix. This was that day of the mass sighting. That was my first day back, and the lights you could see during the day because it was like 3 o'clock. So I mean, it was still hot, and these lights were brighter than the sun because you could see them an hour out of Phoenix. And the whole bus was like, "What are those lights?" And I remember going, "Well, it looks like a stadium because they're just standing still. They weren't moving." And And for an hour, we watched them all. And I go, it looks like the arena in Phoenix, which is downtown. And he was like, no, man, that seems too big to be. And he was like, yeah. I go, did they build a stadium? They're like, no, I was just in Phoenix. Like, there's no stadium. I mean, there's no new stadium. There's the arena. I go, that looks like where the arena's at. The whole bus was watching them. The whole they're throwing out, what it could be. And after a while, we get into Phoenix and the buildings drown the lights out. And I kind of, stopped thinking about the lights. Didn't know what they were. Didn't, it wasn't like a big priority. So we got into the hood, which is like 15th Avenue and Van Buren. I'm like, how are people not freaking out that there is UFOs above the city and no one's freaking out? He's like, no one cares. I'm like, I know it's a big city and you get used to stuff, but that's a UFO above the city. He's like, yeah, okay. So we get into his house and I put my stuff away. I climb on the roof and sit there and watch these lights for hours and hours. Now, this is a night of mass sighting when somebody films it, and that's what you kind of see. And I remember thinking, man, if I had a camera, if I had something, I'd be filming. But it was 97, and it wasn't really like you could just you know take a camera in the hood. You get mugged for it. I mean, they'll mug you for a necklace. So I was like, man, how is not anybody freaking out on this? So that first night I watched for a long time, and nothing really happened. But I remember just watching, and oh yeah, there was a plane, like a jet, that went by and dropped these flares in front of this, like underneath this UFO. And I remember thinking, why are they dropping flares? I go, they're trying to cover it up. I go, those flares are falling. Those lights are still there. I go, yeah, that's not a really good cover story, guys. I go, yeah, it's not working. So I go down and go to bed. So the next day, they're still there. Like the Phoenix Lights for me were like 2 weeks. It wasn't like they left. I kept watching and watching them, and the third day is when it was like maybe 5 o'clock, and something told me to go to sleep. And I remember being tired, and I'm thinking, well, why am I going? Didn't matter. I was going to sleep at 5 in the afternoon. About 8 o'clock, I woke up and something said, "Go outside." I was like, "What? Go outside?" And I walked outside, and the Phoenix Lights, that ship, is right over the house, so close that I could see the balls. There were engines and what looked like brains. The balls had little patterns in them, but it looked like a brain. And I could hear like when you weld, and it makes that sound like like crackling,
Hmm.
and it was making that noise, and you could see like metal dripping off the middle engine, and it looked like when you weld and the metal falls, and it was like dissipating before it hit the ground. And I looked at the ground, and it was kind of like indented, like there was, I could tell like what's up with the ground. And I'm like, is there nobody seeing this? Like, am I the only one awake? It seemed like I was the only one seeing it. I mean, there was nobody around, which is unusual for that hood because there's hookers, gangs, the gang lived right there. I mean, they were always out, but there was nobody out. And I'm sitting there, and it's 8 o'clock, and I remember watching for what felt like to me was 20 minutes. And I finally just got bored with it, and I was just like, wow, it's closed. Well, it's time for bed. I go in, and it's 3 in the morning. What I felt was 20 minutes was really hours. It was 3 in the morning, and I was like, how is it 3 in the morning? Now, I stayed in a room that had a door that led outside, and the bed kind of faced the door, so I'm sitting there and I could hear a storm coming in the distance, and I was like, "Oh, it's gonna cool down." I'm glad I came in because lightning storms are known to kill people. If you're outside, they'll just hit you. And I could hear it hitting the ground. Oh man, I'm glad I came in. One hit the fence. I was like, man, that was the fence. It was like, whoa. Then before I knew it, one hit the door. Boom! And blasted it open. And I'm like, I could see this big light. Like it filled the room, and there was like a black being from the light. It looked black, but there was a being in the middle. And I remember I blinked, like for a second. I blinked, and then I opened my eyes. Like I just blinked, opened my eyes, and it was daylight. And it was just like the room was filled with sun, and I was like, "Whoa, what just happened? Like, like what just happened?" And I wanted to say something, but my brother would have called me crazy. But I had all these images in my head and all these words that were just kind of rolling around in my head. And I remember drawing what I seen in my head. Maybe it would go away. But it was years and years that I carried around these images and all these words, and I couldn't explain where they were from. And then when Facebook first came around, 2004, I started playing like the games on it. But eventually, I would start to write all these words down, and I was just writing, and I didn't think anybody was reading this stuff. So it was just something was telling me write it all down and post it, and I kept doing that, posting it over and over, and it'd be a different kind of thing. Then I stopped for a while. I was like, you know, took a break, and then people started writing me, and they were like, "How come you stopped writing? You guys are reading that?" He goes, "Yeah, there's a bunch of us reading it." I'm like, well, okay. You know, I wrote for like 5 years, and people were reading this stuff, and I didn't know what was coming of it until maybe 2009. And that's when I first got in contact with the god Anubis, and I remember doing the writing, and I was teaching martial arts to my brother-in-law, and I remember that had a lot to do with the Phoenix Lights. So going back to the lights, it was like that was the last night when I saw that being blasted the door of the Phoenix Lights for me. But it was like 2 weeks after the first mass sighting. It was during the Hale-Bopp comet, and you had all that weirdness in San Diego with the cult, UFO cult, and that was towards the last. And then it wasn't until years later, after writing all that all these Egyptian gods started showing up. And the first one was Anubis. I'm teaching my student, and it was his black belt class. It was the last test before I was just going to let him join another class. And he had his basics down. And it was the last set of kicks. And I had been pushing him, and he fell, like he collapsed. And then I was like, oh man, I think I broke him. Like I broke him. So I was gonna tell him, hey, just get up. You're fine. You're done. You got your black belt. You're good to go. But he stood up, and then he like does an elaborate bow, like something you'd see in a uh, like somebody do to a king or something. You know what I mean? Like a big bow. And he stood up, and he had this glazed over look on his face. And I go, James, it's not you, is it? He's like, no. I go, does this have to do with what I'm going to start doing? He's like, yes. And I go, so be it. I agree. I accept. And for like 20 minutes, he goes into this language. Blah, 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 just goes off. Just saying words that I didn't understand. Just goes off for 20 minutes. I'm sitting there like, what's happening? Like, what's going on? And then these 6 big dogs come up and surround him, make a circle. And there's just like an attention. And he claps and he sit at the same time. And then he kneels down and all these dogs start licking him all over. Now, my student was a germaphobe. He would have freaked out. All these dogs were kind of like when a new dog goes into a pack, they kind of do this. They put his smell on, they're licking him all over. He's just like letting them. Then he claps again and they go back into the circle. And he says some other stuff and then he claps again and they run off. And then he kind of like looks like he's about to fall and I catch him. And he's like, "Oh, teacher, do you want me to finish those kicks? We're doing kicks, right?" I'm like, "You don't remember what just happened?" He's like, "No, what are you talking about?" I'm going to sit you down. I'm going to tell you a story. And I told him the same story I just told you guys. And that was like the beginning of what was going to be. I don't know where I learned that magic was real. Because it was maybe about a week later. I gave myself a break. I kept kind of trying to rationalize what I saw. And I remember I go out, I'll just stay away from him. I didn't call him. Then he calls me and he's like, "Hey, can you come over?" I was like, "Is this about what happened?" He's like, "Yeah." I go, "Yeah, I'll come over. I've been thinking about it too." So we make a bonfire in a barrel, like metal barrel. We put all these logs in it and we lit it and we're sitting there and I was drinking a beer and so was he. And I tell him the story and and he's like rubbing his arms and I'm thinking he's sore, but he stands up and he goes over to the barrel and he faces me and puts his hands on the barrel. And I'm like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" He goes, "I'm the next one. I'm the next being that shows up." And he goes, "Do you accept?" And I go, "Yeah, I accept." And he goes off into another thing. And he's going off for like, I don't know, half hour holding onto the barrel. He's saying all these words and then, another language. I don't understand it. But he's the whole time he's holding on to this flaming barrel. I'm thinking, how come his hands aren't blistering up? Why is he not freaking out? He's holding this barrel. Then he takes a stick out of the barrel and starts eating it. And he's like, it's on fire. He's eating it. He's eating the friggin' ember. He's spitting it out. And he puts it back in. And I'm like, holy crap. He goes back and sits down and he's still kind of like smoking. Like the smoke is coming off. Like black on his face. And I go, "Hey, do you mind if I smoke a cigarette after all that?" And he looks at me crazy. And I go, "I'm already lighting a cigarette." I'm like, "I don't care if he says yes or no." I was already lighting. And then it's like he wanted to smoke. So he grabs a log out of the fire. It's on fire. I mean, like, what he grabs is on fire. It's like a coal. And he starts breathing it. And he's sitting there smoking his log while I'm smoking a cigarette. I'm being calm as I can be. I'm like, no way this is happening in my head. And I go, "No, it's happening. He's smoking a log while I'm smoking a cigarette." I put it out, and he puts the log back, and he like kind of like collapses. And I go, "Oh crap, hope he's all right." I kept wondering about his hand. Finally, he wakes up. He's like, "Why do my arms hurt so much?" I go, "Yeah, they should hurt. They should hurt a fucking hell of a lot." And they were normal. They were just like a where the barrel was, like a crease, like when you sleep on a blanket and it leaves like a mark. That's what it was like. It was like this big, deep crease, he was like, my hands and arms hurt. I go, are they hot? He goes, yeah. I go, let me tell you what just happened, bro. Like, it happened again. I go, oh yeah, it happened again. And now I'm sitting here going, I'm telling him the whole story, and I go, magic is real, like it's real. I go, there's no other way to explain that. He's just like, okay, man, I gotta go to bed. I go, yeah, I gotta go too. It was like maybe 12 midnight. I went home, and maybe 2 weeks went by, and he asked me to come back over again. Now, I've been thinking about it for the 2 weeks and kind of trying to rationalize. Did that just happen? No, that happened. Oh yeah, you saw what you saw. So he calls me up. He's like, "Come over." And I already knew what it was about, and he had the fire going already, and you know we're drinking a beer, and it was the same thing. It was like another being showed up, said a bunch of words, and he was playing with fire that day. He was holding on to it. He was like he was doing stuff, and it was like shooting flames. Like it was just like was, man, I'm like, I can't even believe this is happening. But I'm calm about it. Like I'm not freaking out. I'm treating him like a friend. Like it's not something out of the ordinary. It was that one, and then 2 weeks after that, it was another being. And I remember he had the fire set. I show up, and I go, you're already there. And he's like, yeah. But I could hear like when another being showed up, it went quiet. Like we were out in the country, so there was like noises, frogs and crickets, but then it went quiet. Oh,
Like what we
man.
talked about in your last episode, right? Where everything just is gone.
Yeah, it was quiet, and I could hear car wrecks and like stuff happening all at once. And he was like, "Do you hear that?" And he's like, "I made that." And then this lightning bolt, boom, and then like he goes off and he tells me stuff that's gonna happen in the future, like stuff with the food, and that there'll be wars, and there'll be a lot of blood, and all this stuff that's happening that I'm supposed to help and use the gifts he's about to give me. So he goes off into the languages again. He goes, "This will be the last one of us." And I go, "Okay." And then he snaps out of it. He's like, "It happened again." I go, "Yeah." "Oh yeah, it happened again." So that morning, I decided to spend the night there. And that morning, um, he had this bush outside his house, and I was standing near, and it was the winter time, and I was standing there next to this bush, and I noticed it had roses on it, but it wasn't a rose bush. It was just like a bush, but it had roses coming, blooming out of it. I'm like, how is this possible? Like, this ain't even a rose bush, but there's roses. And I look up, and there's this lady who's draped in like a pink, I don't know, aura, and she touches my forehead. Boom! And I'm like, whoa! And she like flies away. And he comes walking in and goes, "What was that?" I go, I don't know. Like, I don't know what that was. It ended up being the goddess Isis. It was Anubis, it was Ra, and Isis that I come to find out later. Because they came back. It was like, after those visitations, I was getting stuff at home where I woke up halfway off my bed and I was hugging Isis, and she was telling me, "I will protect you and I will keep you." And my body was hanging halfway off the bed, like a plank. And so when I woke up, I'm like, how am I even doing this? And I had tears in my eyes. And after that, I realized how much magic controls this world. But it all stemmed from all the visitations. Like it had to do with Lord Shiva, with the lights. Because all the words they had written down were like bringing these beings to me. And that's what kind of he was saying. He was all those words that you wrote down open the door to Anubis, open the door to Ra, open the door to Isis. And now you have to use what we're giving you to help you. So that's when it was like maybe 2010. And I started helping people online. I healed them of stuff. I brought one guy back from the brink of death. And it was just all to show people that magic was real. This was in San Diego too when it was happening. This was right before I went to Spokane and met Jennifer Rothschild and all the stuff with the vampires and the werewolves and all that before that happened.
That's how you met Jennifer, was she came to you basically online for a healing, and then you came across all this with the vampires, you had that vision, right?
Yeah, yeah. Because I was adding Rothschild. In my head, this voice kept telling me to add Rothschild. It was to meet her, and I eventually did. I mean, I still am friends with a lot of the Rothschild that I added them. They weren't aware at first, but once you started talking to them, they realized, oh, we can have this thing, and there's a royalty, Princess Debbie. She was out of New Zealand, and she came to me and asked me to heal her, but she was like, I don't want to tell you what it's for, and I go, sure, I'll heal you. And she was Jennifer's friend. She knows all of them. They're like royalty. I go, if I help you, I want you to tell them, all the royals that I'm here. She goes, they already know you. I told them everything. I go, okay. So I healed her. She ends up having a baby. That's what she wanted. And I remember she was like, you are magic, aren't you? I go, yeah. She was, I know, because I wasn't able to have children, and now I have a son. Now, Prince Peter Rothschild was her boyfriend at the time. And he was like, I don't know, jealous because I was talking to her. He had sent 13 of the most powerful witches to attack. And she told me, you need to be careful. He's Illuminati and he controls this coven. I go, this is 13? She's like, yeah. Oh, yeah. I go, they visited me. I go, I attacked them back. And they asked me politely to stop because I was messing them up. And I remember one of them coming up in the astral and saying, "We didn't know who you were. Can you please stop?" Oh, well, stop attacking. I could see them in their circle, and they threw these old pitchforks at me, like old tools. And I knew it was spells. And when the spells were coming up, Isis came up and it was like she came up right in front of me and it went around me. And I took all those old tools, broke them in half, and made my own stuff and started tossing them back. And it was blowing them left, blowing them right. I was in between them. I was among them. I was away from them. I was right next to them talking, and then I was outside of them laughing. And finally they asked me, stop. We didn't know who you were. We didn't know. We didn't know. Just stop. That was like the beginning of the Spokane thing with Jennifer, because he was part of that, and there was a few others. One was a Booth that was related to the one that shot the president, Booth. They're all like family. They're all related. Like they all came out of the woodwork after that. And I've been on this adventure ever since. And there's still other stuff that I'd like to go into, but I think that's probably enough for now.
I have a couple of questions before we head off anyways. Going back to your extraterrestrial experience during the Phoenix Lights, do you remember much of what it looked like, or was it just a black silhouette?
No, I saw the ship. It was the
No,
the, the,
I meant when you were falling asleep. When you said you saw that,
the light.
or not the light that you said like at night, like you were just before you fell asleep. It looked like there was something in the doorway.
Oh no, it blew the door open. It was like a lightning bolt, blew the door open. It was just a bunch of light that flooded the room. And there was like a being in the middle of the light. And that's when I blinked and opened my eyes and it was daylight. Like it was just daylight.
Do you have any memory of that being or visual? You know.
I can still see it, but it was like the light was so flooding the room that he appeared like you ever see the hear the dark man with the hat that people see sometimes?
Yeah, the Hat Man.
Yeah, it was him.
Oh,
He was, yeah, that's
interesting.
what I see. It was the guy with the hat.
The Hat Man.
That was, yeah, like I said, it was
Wow.
like a second. And it had all the time gone. 3 hours
Do you
of
think they
time.
took you?
I think what?
Do you think they made you pass out and did something to you that night?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I was going to ask, do you think it was Lord Shiva that was compelling you to get to Phoenix?
It could be. I think it's more the beings that were in that UFO. Um, I'm not sure what was happening in India then. I know that statues were drinking milk when I was there. And like that was on YouTube too. I remember seeing it firsthand. I'm like, oh yeah, there's statues drinking milk here. I'm like, yeah, Catholics kind of go through something like that, but it's more tears out of their eyes. It ends up being something else. But yeah, there was certain things that were happening in India at the same time. Like their gods were waking up.
Do you have any reason? Do you think Shiva chose you?
Well, I don't think he chose me. I think I was born to do that because he called me the chosen one, and I didn't know what it meant. But that title has followed me my whole life, even in martial arts. One of the girls was kind of, I don't know, touched. She was kind of spiritual. She called me that once, and then my friend kept calling me that after she called me. It was more to make fun of me, but that had followed me forever. I mean, when ISIS came, she'd called me that, but she gave me the name Phoenix. She didn't call me Peter. She called me Phoenix. She goes, Phoenix, you are my highest priest on earth. Now go and help people. And that's like another story from because that was right before I went to San Diego that she appeared and I went somewhere else and all these beings were there. What you call the Greys. There was goddesses. There was Hecate was there. I had seen the god, but there's also a goddess. And this building that was held together by rose vines. Now, you told me everybody on earth has a rose up here. And I looked down and there's these roses that were colorful. Some were throwing sparks, some were on fire, some were striped, polka dotted. So each one of these people believe in me on earth. And you have one now. Mine was flaming. And I remember seeing the vines holding this big white temple together. And what I could only describe as heaven in the middle of this big forest and a big white temple and you see in the background and the animals talk, the grass talk. It sounded like children playing. And I remember seeing like dogs coming up and saying hi. They had voices. Like yeah, I could understand them.
Well, thank you for sharing those experiences with us this evening, and we'll dive back into it again at a later date, Peter.
Alrighty.
Bye, everybody.